We would have these, fancy Thanksgiving dinners with the family china and 200-year-old sterling silver place settings, and it was ridiculous. Auntie Feast and Uncle Chuck would show up. Uncle Chuck would show up with an uninvited guest, typically somebody who was either accused or convicted. And would commend my straight-laced side of the family. Everybody was actually very comfortable with this. And for us to be children, to share and accept people at the table was really an amazing gift that I feel like a lot of other families would have been totally insulated from had it not been for Uncle Chuck, for what he did with his life, and also for Auntie Feast's total acceptance of her situation living with a man like Uncle Chuck. And I think there's a foundational element there that I think is an important part of Trey and Felix and your thankful. The concept of sophistication. And Auntie Feast was just absolute perfection at all times, with her hair perfect, her language was elegant, and her presence was just amazing. On my Christmas present from Uncle Chuck when I was 8 was a pin-up nudie calendar bouquet. I learned the concept of open-mindedness. And I think anybody who was exposed to Uncle Chuck lived and was like beaten down by his open-mindedness. It was amazing. And I remember I was in his Lotus, and I was 6 years into a Christian school, getting all kinds of very traditional dogma aimed at me. And it was a great part of my early development. And Uncle Chuck looks over at me and he goes, "Nephew Marky, you know the Bible? That was just a creative writing assignment." and so whether that's true or not, that doesn't matter. What's important is that to critically look at the world around you, and for yourself to try to figure out what is fact and fiction in your mind, right? So that you can be your own boss and your own leader. And Uncle Chuck was pretty amazing at that. On the other hand, my mom, 10, she had a silver Honda that was a stick shift with probably like 257,000 miles on it. And she drove me out into the almond orchards, or almond if you're from Chico, and sat me in the car and taught me how to drive her stick shift. It's like herky-jerky. And so she was fairly open-minded herself. At 12, I learned commitment. And if you think about what Auntie Feast did with her very long career at some of the hardest schools in this area, working with kids with some of the greatest needs, and to try to turn them in the right direction. It was incredible. It was impressive to see as a young child that someone could be so committed to a particular population. This story about Uncle Chuck, I don't know if it's fact or fiction. I do know that it's mostly fact. When he was in the Navy, part of his job was to type up the handwritten applications for people that were applying to the officers program. And he noticed that when in the race box, if he typed off anything other than Caucasian, no one got promoted. This was like in the 60s and 70s. Uncle Chuck said, "Well, I can fix that problem." And African Americans, he changed everybody's race profile to Caucasian. And all of a sudden, in the officers club were people that were not Caucasian. And the Navy lost it. It lasted to the point that they put him in solitary confinement for 11 months in the rig. Okay? And so when you think about, and you try to understand Uncle Chuck's message of his life, right? Defending pimps, drug dealers, cooks, and thieves. What he was really doing was probably one of the most amazing American expressions we've ever seen in our lives. He was defending everybody, right, with equal representation and due process. Okay? At 21, I learned strength. Uncle Chuck, ferocious. Auntie Feast, quiet and graceful, but both strong. At 40, I started to understand the concept of fortitude. Uncle Chuck, who was bedridden for the better part of a few years, mostly, he never complained. And he was always happy to see us. And Auntie Feast was by his side. And that was tough. She put her life on hold, but she was going to be with Uncle Chuck through the end, and she was. And at 45, and that's where I'm at now, I think we've learned the concept of grace.